I found the greatest value in body work. And I realized that that trauma and emotion, and by the way, I did learn that emotions are a thought attached to a feeling. And those feelings can be stuck in the body. So I noticed that I became, what was most effective for me had to do with the senses of massage therapy and reflexology and acupuncture. And it had to do with touch.
I am so excited to have my old friend, Ellen Stetson, here with me today. I've known Ellen for about 18 or 19 years. It's been a long time. And I've had the privilege and the honor to watch Ellen grow and shift and change and become the beautiful human being that I know her today, which she was from the first day that I met her. But we've all gone through some journeys over the last 18 years.
Indeed.
And yeah, and Ellen is so special to me that I really wanted to share her story and give a little bit of perspective on spiritual growth, the ins and the outs of it and the ups and the downs. And so that's why she's here today. So Ellen, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. Thanks.
Where I want to get started and what I would like to begin with, just to kind of get our viewers a little bit more and give them a little bit more understanding of what your background is. Do you mind kind of just talking a little bit about your journey and how your spiritual journey began?
Yes, I grew up in a family with two very different religions. My parents were sort of on opposite ends of the spectrum with organized religion. My mother was in a very old metaphysical church and practicing as a Christian Scientist, and did not believe in seeing doctors, which was a whole nother story. But then my father was steeped in the Methodist Church, and there was always a push-pull factor going on there. I dropped my interest in world religions, in all religions altogether, because I think largely because of the disagreement, and decided when I was a freshman in college to take a course in world religions, which was pivotal at the time. I really saw world religions and diversity as the way. And I began my study of all major religions of the world at that point. Didn't pick one in particular, but I would say that class, as a freshman in college, began my journey.
So after you started searching different religions and having a greater understanding, what did you figure out? What was the message that you received that fits you or started shaping you in a way that has brought you here today?
I realized as a young adult that I had no particular belief system, and that your beliefs are what help you grow your roots. So I was being without roots. I wandered greatly and just spent my 20s and early 30s without being grounded in any particular way. And I was just interested in trying out lots of things and lots of ideas and lots of people and places. Just a few substances here and there, nothing heavy. But I realized that I was directionless without a particular belief system. And that changed when I was in my early 30s.
And what happened?
And what happened was, after realizing I felt ungrounded and adrift in the world, a friend of mine, a roommate, said at the time, "I want to introduce you to a massage therapist, and I think you need to go get a massage." And I said, "Massage therapy? What's that?" And I was maybe 31 at the time. Um, that moment began my spiritual journey, although I didn't know that at the time, because the massage therapist, whom I only met once and never saw again, uh, I was very reluctant to get on a stranger's table, but I insisted on keeping on all of my clothes, even my socks. No skin contact with a stranger, says I.
Mm-hmm.
And once he didn't even put his hands on me. I remember having gone reluctantly and found him to be different than anyone I'd ever met before. I couldn't put my finger on it, but he said, "Just relax and let's do an hour of energy work." And I thought to myself, what is that? And from the moment he put his hands above my body, I left my body. And I felt my feet rising up off the table, then my back, and later my head. I became very frightened, very frightened. But he was persistently and gently guiding me and talking me through. He said, "This is okay. This is all a part of it," and reassuring. After spending a lot of time out of my body and being both fascinated and fearful, uh, when he finished his session, left the room and then came back, and I was seated on his sofa, I said, "What just happened here? I don't understand any of this." And he said, "This is just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the beginning." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I will be clear in good time, and this is just the beginning of your journey." Now, that stuck with me, but was very mysterious, and I didn't understand that at all, and didn't for quite some time. Um, but it was later in my late 30s. I didn't ever go back at that time for massage therapy or energy work, but I knew that something significant had happened, and again continued my journey into the non-understanding of life, forgetting everything that we came here to learn. And only when I was in the Grand Canyon on a whitewater rafting trip, camping for 10 days, and I mean oarboats, not these motorized vehicles. I was in a small oarboat. And on that trip, I realized that God lives in the Grand Canyon on the Colorado River. And I thought, why would I say that? Because I could look up at a million stars in the Milky Way and watch the passage of the stars from one rim of the canyon to the other. And I realized it was the most spiritual, connected place I'd ever been. And I felt deeply that I was more than just little Ellen, girl from small town in Georgia. I didn't understand fully, but after that trip, the guide that I most connected with on that trip called me. We were living in different parts of the country, but he called me on the phone. He said, "I'll be in your city. I want you to meet a teacher of mine named Arnold Patton." And I didn't connect with that either until I read the book You Can Have It All and was introduced to universal principles.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my, this is it. This is me. This is who I am. Everything about this book, I resonated with You Can Have It All. And so when the guide said to me, he's going to be in your city, I'm coming to the workshop, would you like to go?
Mm-hmm.
I got the brochure, hard copy, and looked at it, and my whole soul just fell into the center of the earth, and I went, oh, that's it. That's where I'm supposed to be. So that was one of my early experiences of being led. I didn't seek it out. It came to me when I was ready.
Mm-hmm. And isn't that an important thing to recognize?
Yes, it is. It came
Yeah.
when I was ready.
Yeah. And, and I love that. I love that statement, because, if you can listen to something over and over and over again, and it just, you don't hear it. It's almost like you turn deaf to it. And then all of a sudden you can read it for the 30th time. And then you're like, oh my gosh, now I get it. And how profound it is, because, okay, now you've done your work and you're ready to take this step. And it's so significant. So once you listened and you participated in the workshop, then where did that lead you as far as your spiritual growth?
I met my tribe in that workshop.
Mm-hmm.
I did listen to other teachers, of course, and I went to workshops with Louise Hay, and I began reading other teachers of the 80s, the late 70s and early 80s, and through the 80s and early 90s. I went to at least a dozen of Arnold Patton's workshops around the country because that's where my tribe was.
Mm-hmm.
Met my spiritual family all over the place and understood that my journey would start with learning what are the principles on which I wish to base my life so that I can be all that I was meant to be. And it had to do with unconditional love, non-judgment of self and others, and much more in the way of universal law. And I realized that although a Christian background brought me, in my case, fortunately, unconditional love and support of my family, that I didn't resonate with traditional organizations, as it were. And my personality really doesn't gel well with structures that are of the day. The corporate world was never for me. And I think it had to do with I never gelled well with authority figures. Because I always felt like, who are others to tell me who I am and what to do and who I'm meant to be. And so I felt that structures of organized religion were, not all, but most, were largely dry and impersonal and much more interested in doing the right thing as defined by men, white men in particular. And I didn't get that at the time, but older white men were dominant in the religious worlds of America. Mm-hmm. And I thought there was so much more to believe. So after continuing to go to personal development workshops, I continued with therapies like hypnotherapy. I did massage therapy, reflexology. I did Uh, I think the most significant, well, I did some therapy with pastoral counseling because I knew the pastors personally and loved them as friends. But I found the greatest value in body work,
Mm.
and I realized that that trauma and um, emotion. And by the way, I did learn that emotions are a thought attached to a feeling,
Mm.
and those feelings can be stuck in the body. So I noticed that I became what was most effective for me had to do with the senses of massage therapy and reflexology and acupuncture. Um, and it had to do with touch, the value of touch and moving energy. So,
Yeah. So, from going from the first massage that you had that was energy work, which energy work is falls under that label of massage therapy. So then later you tried it again, and it was effective for you in a way of letting go of some of those old emotions and embedded. I'm going to say trauma, but trauma is a very broad word,
great.
and yeah, and I want to just kind of build on that, because a lot of people don't recognize that that trauma can just be words that were said to you, and they don't even have to be in a mean, hateful, abusive way. It's the way that we perceive the words at the time, and the way that the Akashic guides always explain trauma to me is that it's words or actions that make you feel small. So, whatever was said to you in the most basic way, and I always see, like it's something as simple as when you were in the second grade, maybe you misspelled a word and the teacher said, "I'm sorry, you failed this test. You need to study harder." But in your mind, I studied as hard as I could and I can't figure out why I couldn't spell that word. There's something wrong with me. I can't figure this out. And then you start getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's trauma. And that's creating this belief system within you that you are less than. And what we have to recognize is that something that's so simple is an innocent discussion that somebody may have with you. You can take it in a way that makes your heart tighten up, makes your chest feel constricted, or you're not in your stomach. And that emotion gets embedded. And that becomes a form of trauma that we don't even recognize that we have to work through. But for you, recognizing that these emotions, even as minor as they are, you found that these modalities, as far as massage therapy and reflexology and acupuncture, help to release those emotions. Is that correct?
Most definitely. And
Yeah.
you just reminded me how vital that is to recognize trauma, and we don't always in the moment. And I just thought of the first time an adult ever hit me
Mm.
was when I was in the first grade, and I was talking when the teacher was talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I was given the admonishment that you don't talk. Children don't speak unless they're
Mm-hmm.
spoken to. And she came over to my desk and asked me to reach out my hand, and she hit me on the hand with a ruler, and it stung. And I can feel that now. And so, even as a child, I was shocked, number one, that an adult would hit me,
Mm-hmm.
as that was not my experience until I was 6. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know for so many, it starts much earlier than that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
that was the way of discipline in those 1950s,
Yeah.
6.
Yeah. Well, and I grew up in the 70s and 60s and 70s, and and it was kind of the same way. But again, we don't think about something as a simple action like that as actually being trauma, because we associate trauma as something big, being
Yes.
raped or physically being abused, or something that we put in a grander category. But I don't think that we give ourselves enough grace and honor in being able to understand that all of those little things really begin to add up, and then they begin to set patterns in our lives that create certain actions and reactions in our behavior. And when we talk about breaking down those belief systems and how important and significant it is, if you begin to see and really look at your patterns, and then you can trace it back to an adult treated me this way. And what was the significance of that action that I interpreted and held on to? And then how are other things that were similar like that happen that are just making it bigger, 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 bigger. But when we get to be where we are today, then we can't see how all of these little events tied together as a big event. And so this isn't really where I wanted to go, because I wanted to talk to you on a different conversation about massage therapy, but we just opened the door. So kind of explain how massage therapy helped to release some of these emotions that were within you.
You brought in this idea of cumulative gunk. I think of it as effluvia, that it's gunk that we, you know, a rolling stone gathers lots of moss, and every moment of our lives can bring us something that adds or detracts, that makes us feel feel our more, or feel less than. And those moments that bring in fear, or less than, or smaller than, are the ones that I see do the hiding. Those moments do the hiding within uh, our muscle, our sinew, our bones, our brain, in our cellular structure. And with that in mind, I really have found to this day that one of the most valuable things in my life has been bodywork. In that is it's simply all the modalities are aids in bringing about release from all that we accumulate.
Mm-hmm.
Release.
Yeah. And which, of course, I mean, I'm a massage therapist as well. And you and I have a long history with massage therapy. And so I am a believer, and I am passionate about massage. And what is so interesting about this profession is that, the common person doesn't understand all of the ins and outs. And there's a lot of massage therapists out there that are practicing that are not taught. They're taught the basic functions of massage therapy, but they really are not taught what the emotional and physical benefits are on that deep cellular level. And, what I think is important for people to understand is how, the old saying, the issues are in the tissues. And, that's an old saying. And, it's just so interesting, how we have disease, which is a lot of times dis-ease is associated with those memories, those traumas, those emotions that we go through, fight or flight, and how our body stays triggered. And, in that constant state of adrenaline, and how disruptive that is, and how the ability to disengage those actions due to massage therapy and the other different modalities that fall under that umbrella are so significant and so important to our human existence that it's a shame that people don't know more about it. Do you have any other thoughts or anything that you want to share about that?
Well, I agree. my heart is often going out to children of war, adults of war. Um, and I first saw trauma in the body when I was traveling with a singing group. I was 21 years old in college, and the Red Cross enabled us to travel uh, to Air Force bases like Andrews Air Force Base and Keesler Air Force Base. This was the Vietnam era soldiers, my generation, being carried off planes, and us 6 women with guitars who were singers sang to the bodies of men who'd been torn apart mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's when I really got it, when I saw shrapnel being removed from the bodies or burns from head to toe.
Mm-hmm.
Featureless men
Yeah.
that that I could not fathom the engagement that they had given and the pain that they were experiencing as a result. So it changed my life dramatically, and I realized what trauma, what war, what fighting, what anger, what fear does to the body. And so I tend to look at things on the macro and then bring it into the micro. I saw, unbeknownst to me, trauma in the macro that was I was not expecting that traveling for the Red Cross. I wasn't. But at a very young age, when you see, oh, this is what war does,
Mm-hmm.
it tears people apart forever. Um, I knew that my role was going to be greater. I've come to know that I am one of the archetypes that's known as, my archetype is a teacher healer. And today I can only say I came to that because I lived long enough.
Mm-hmm.
If you live into your 70s, you get to see, oh, this is what I was here for. This is what I was meant to do, which led me to all of those experiences of witnessing and singing. Who knew? But and playing the guitar. But I thought that's what I was going for. But no, it was to really ground my purpose, my greater purpose of being a teacher healer.
Yeah. Well, now you just opened the door to another thing. I have 2 comments, and I hope I don't forget what I was going to say. But the other thing is being able to recognize, on that spiritual content and what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation about the understanding of non-judgment, compassion, understanding, love from the heart, loving unconditionally, and being able to have that experience that you had with the Red Cross and being able to see lives and humans in a different way than where most of us see them in a bubble. Like we just see individuals from our image and what we perceive them to be because of our belief systems, and we put labels on people, we categorize people, we just assume that this is who they are. But when you can see what people truly experience, when you can see the stories, and then you, like you said, at our age, getting older and living a little bit of life and becoming more understanding in people's reactions and actions and, the way that their struggles are and where they come from. I think it's so important for us all to be able to recognize that those soldiers that you saw, we will never be able to understand, what they went through, what experiences they had to go through before and after that event, and how that can form and shape somebody. And by being able to see things on a deeper level and understanding of life experiences. And again, I think that old saying, with age comes wisdom, and being able because we've experienced a little bit more, but we've also been more open, to seeing these things and being more understanding. I think that when we look at our spiritual journey, I think that that's extremely significant. And that experience that you had opened up a new door that you weren't aware of in spiritual consciousness, and how that is related to all of us. And so not only being able to sit in the Grand Canyon, the canyon of the Grand Canyon, and be able to look up at the stars and see this magnificent universe, but then understanding the struggles of human life and what we go through as humans in order to live that purpose of our soul's existence. And then getting to this point to where you can look back and say, that's my purpose. Now I get it. 60, 70 years old. Oh, it wasn't my job. It wasn't the label that I put on myself. It was the life that I served. That's my purpose. Now I understand, and how significant that is for all of us to understand.
There's so many markers that I that I saw deeply, but the impact of those markers is not lost on me today, because often, as you say, in retrospect, we get it. So when we see that experience and think, I don't understand why I'm watching wounds being cleaned, and I'd never seen bodies in that form before. I'd never known the depth of anger that I saw the night that Martin Luther King was killed and my father's business was burned to the ground. Mm. He showed up, and my father became the child crying in a puddle, and I became the adult carrying him to the scene of the fire. And I was 18 years old, and the anger of the Black community was so great, and we were living in the South on the night that King was killed. And all I knew then was this was meant to be. My father's experience is changing our lives as a family, but it's part of the greater change that must be affected by the death of Martin Luther King Jr. So, you know how all those pieces begin to, it's like a puzzle that we can't see until we live it.
Yep. But I think that you're also bringing up a beautiful point that people don't have the understanding always. And you just brought it up beautifully in being able to see the perception of circumstance. And when you can see your father's grief for losing his business, he could have held a whole lot of anger, and you could blame, it's their fault, it's this, and, it's so-and-so did this, and we're the victims of that behavior, and how dare you, and you're a horrible human being because you did this. But being, and I'm calling it the victim mentality, because I really want people to hear how easily we can begin to blame others, and we can justify the actions of this was done to me, so therefore I am the victim. Now, the extent of that word victim, and the bigger it gets or the smaller it gets, obviously depends on ourselves. But I think that what the biggest picture is, and what really needs to be understood, is there really a victim? In that sense of being able to see the whole picture, and exactly how you described it, and that point of being able to understand, well, wait just a minute. What if I was this person and I had been treated like this my whole life? And what if I could truly see the entire picture from the universal perspective? What's changing? What has to be brought to the surface so we change our behaviors? What has to happen in order for us to gain the understanding to learn compassion and to see that sometimes there is a bigger master plan that we're not aware of? And and what my heart wants to share with everyone is that you can put yourself in the situation of being the victim, and this person did this to me, or this person did that, or they said this or that, or whatever it may be, and you can put yourself in that position and you can live there, but you will never be happy. You will never find joy. You will never find that full capacity of love. You'll never find that full capacity of compassion because you're not seeing the whole picture. And once you can see all sides and you can have the grace and understanding that, I wonder if there was a plan for this.
And
Go ahead.
sorry, so my father's lesson then became mine today.
Yeah.
He chose in that moment not to be the victim because almost immediately he found out that the young men that had mistakenly thrown that Molotov cocktail through the front window, and it was a mistake. They meant to target another business. But he found out those young men were living in a home that he was renting to their parents.
Oh.
And he went to court and he advocated for them and asked for the court's lenience. And in that moment, his compassion and his forgiveness and his desire to seek understanding showed me how I choose today to live my life. Rather than blame, shame, and guilt, I hope that I'm not choosing the role of victim because there's more to the story.
Yeah, there always is, isn't it? Yeah, we're never going to know the whole story. And what's so amazing is that, yay for your dad, number one. What a beautiful human being, and what a beautiful person to be able to exemplify life and share his wisdom and his heart and his compassion. What a great role model for everybody that he touched. And what's so amazing about situations like that too is that he probably affected so many different people that he had no idea that he even touched. And how our actions, like something from that specific situation, something that you do from your heart just because you feel like it's the right thing to do, and that 6 degrees of separation, you
Yes.
just never understand what effect that had on people that you will never see. But in the same sense, if you do something that's mean and hurtful, how that affects others the same way as something that's loving and caring and compassionate. Which way do we want to go? How do we choose our path? It's up to everybody to make that choice and the decision. And I think what you and I are saying here is find your heart and see the bigger picture and understand that there's always a plan that is far beyond what the humans can comprehend. Yeah.
I'm so glad I lived long enough to know this, to understand this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. And, me as well, but you, I'm so happy that, that you're here to be able to share that experience and that story, because I think it's so significant. We don't necessarily see things in that bigger perspective, in our everyday world, because we're so tuned in to our little worlds. And I think it's important for those stories to be shared. But being able to move on from that topic, the other thing that is really important to me, because I know you so well, you have a lot of gifts that are of that love and the compassion. And you share your gifts in many different ways. You have been a massage therapist, and you currently are an end-of-life doula. And I'm curious to know why you chose to become a end of life doula. Can you share that story?
I can. Thank you. I began my career believing that I was here to change the world one corporation at a time. And as a leadership trainer and management consultant, I was very sure in my 20s and 30s that I was going to be working on the macro, as it were, and change the world in a big way. It occurred to me in the middle of all that, that's not where change happens. It happens one heart, one soul at a time. And so my career became much less focused on the structure of corporation and much more focused on the individual, then more focused on the individual experience and the sacredness of each one. Uh, and as a massage therapist, I really understood that my presence was all that was required. And not only what came through my heart and mind and soul, but what came through my body and my hands. That I was not there as a doer, but I was there as a conduit. And my metaphor is that of being the hollow log through which the waters flow. In the middle of the stream, I saw a hollow log with water flowing through it, which is what I wish to be as a massage therapist. And if I could affect just someone for a moment in a positive way on a massage therapy table, the pandemic hit. I knew we experienced COVID-19 killing millions of people. And right here in my little computer, I thought, what am I to do? And I found something called a death cafe, which was, and they're all over the world. There are thousands of death cafes that are now virtual. But it's discussion groups, just discussing life and death and having conversations about death and all that, all the gifts of death and the challenges of death. And the group that I chose was led by an end-of-life doula. And she said to me, I think you have the doula heart. And from there, I thought, maybe I'm supposed to. And I realized through my life, I was often the one called to the bedside of someone who was dying. And I got to witness that, not just for my father, but for others, my neighbors as well. And so in becoming a doula through the University of Vermont was one of the greatest gifts to myself. And so now having volunteered for hospice and seen death, and not just death itself, which is I see as a very sacred time and a holy moment. I see what comes before and the transition, the transformation that takes place of those that are at end of life. I just wish to show up and be a guide and anchor the space of love and compassion in that time.
So, what do you feel like the individual that's passing? What do you feel like they're going through these experiences that you've witnessed?
I believe that they're experiencing all of their stories and the joy of being with someone. I've noticed what they wanted to most tell me as an end-of-life doula. They wanted to tell me their stories. As you're asking me about mine, they just wanted to tell their stories. And they would often choose the most innocent moment when they were having a diaper change or a bath or trying to eat a bite or drink something. They would say, I was in this school bus and almost hit a child and I was saved by my angel from hitting a child, or whatever poignant story would come to their minds. So part of my mission is to become just to listen to the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And the transformation for them is about storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
But also they get to experience or find resolution to their anger, pain, and fear. If they're able to find resolution, my belief is that those that are at end of life would like to see those all healed. For some, it happens on this side, and I truly believe for some it happens beyond what we know is the veil, the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My wish for them is that they find it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that, a lot of people, we gather around our loved ones, and some people don't have the loved ones. And, sometimes they are alone. And so being able to be the old saying, a space holder, just want to hold space.
Yes.
And how significant that is through so many different stories, whether it's at the end of the life experience of a human being or if it's through their life experience as a whole. And it's interesting that you bring up that they want to tell their story. They want to share these experiences. And isn't it interesting that that's all we want to do our entire lives? As soon as we develop the ability to tell stories as children, we want to share those stories. And how important is it to be heard? How does it make us feel when somebody listens to what we have to say? Or, going back to that point when you were a child and being told not to speak, that you were not to speak. And that's the way I was raised up too. Raised up. I don't know where that came from. Raised, raised up, grew up. But I'm combining words. But that's the way that I was raised as well. You're to be seen and not heard. You don't have a voice, and you do exactly as the parents say, and there's no arguing about it. And our generations were raised more or less that way. And it's interesting. So when you really look at just what does a human want, they simply want to be heard. And how important it is for us to play our roles, our purpose, and being able to be present and allow others to be able to speak, and you be 100% fully there for them. And what a great, great gift it is for both sides, for us to be that space holder, but for others to be able to be heard. And those are life-changing moments for people.
Powerful and joyful, which is something you might not expect at the end of life, but I've seen it as a celebratory passage, and I wish for everyone that they could experience peace and joy and love in the end, because I believe that's the way we come in, is in love, and why not lead that way?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful way to walk out of this earth, for sure, out of the human body that we're existing in. So through all of the years of experiences and the beautiful journeys that you've had, good and bad, or I'm not even going to say good and bad, because I don't think that there's good and bad anymore. I think there's more just our perception. But as the time is that our brains perceive things as being a little bit uncomfortable. So let's go say from the uncomfortable moments to the joyful moments. What do you think has had what experience has had the most impact to bring you where you are today? Can you narrow it down or name a few?
I would say the number of them, but putting myself in places where I am meant to be a space holder. And my most powerful was in 2016. I decided to volunteer as a massage therapist and drive to Cannonball, South Dakota, and become a part of the Standing Rock water protection theater. And the day I arrived, there were 1,000 people in this small bowl shape in the earth, which one environmentalist called the navel of the world. Mm-hmm. And the Sioux tribes and all the tribes of the Indian nations came together as one, as did clergy from all over the world. And I realized it was giving birth. This was the rise of the end of fossil fuels. That was a very powerful moment for me, and unexpected. And I went because this pull was so strong. I could just not go. You go where you're empowered. Where you are, where I am empowered, I am invited. Mm. I am invited. I am empowered. A Course in Miracles. Mm-hmm. So thank you for inviting me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what did, I mean, you had a lot of experiences, but of that specific experience, what was the one thing that you walked out, your aha moment? What was that one thing that you were like, okay, now I'm viewing things differently than what I did when I arrived here?
I was staring at an army tent, and listening to the cacophony of spirits and the dust and the horses and the drums and the voices of fear and pain and anguish. Really, this is my water source, and people want to lay a gas pipe underneath it. And I heard in great big neon letters over my head, I saw and heard the sign say to me, all is well, despite appearances. That was it for me. It was all is well, despite appearances. Mm-hmm. And I realized that was the moment of my connection with all of that drama and theater and pain. Was not just on the micro, but on the macro. And having a 4-year college degree in American Studies, I stood there and realized, well, damnation, not once in my degree was I ever taught about, in American Studies, never were the tribes recognized or written about at all. Yeah. And I was furious and ready to go back to the college and throw the degree at their feet and say, what the hell? Mm-hmm. This is not American Studies. I missed out, and I felt the anguish of what colonization had done to the Americas in that moment, and realized that as long as I'm alive, I wish to be a non-native ally and advocate for Indigenous people, mm-hmm. the people before the people.
Yeah. Well, and I want to, I just want to throw out there, again, seeing a bigger picture, becoming more aware of what's outside of our bubble and what we've been taught and told. And again, how important this is. And I'm seeing this trend in your life, how interesting it is that you've lived through these, I'm calling them conflicts, to be able to observe the bigger picture, to be able to see it from a perspective where you can see all these different sides and be able to come together and understand that every time that you've had this happen, what's come forth is your heart. You've had the most beautiful circumstances and not comfortable situations, but, to be able to really look in and dig into your heart and see the love and the compassion for for a bigger picture, a broader perspective than what we may have walked into the situation with. And I want to honor you for that. I mean, what really and truly, when we look at the gifts of our life, what beautiful gifts, and what a beautiful opportunity to really become the spiritual being that we're meant to be by being able to go through these circumstances and have these experiences. So thank you. And thank you for seeing with your heart and not your head and your eyes. How beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Lisa.
So we're gonna. I'm curious to know what parting words of wisdom would you feel comfortable with sharing at this time?
I would say that if we know what our purpose is, and it may take a while, some of us come in knowing, but most of us don't. I would recommend highly asking yourself, what is my purpose, my greater purpose? What is my spirit, not just my mind, but my spirit here to do? What is my gift this time around? And I do believe in reincarnation, but I would ask, what is my purpose? And I've refined what my purpose is over time. Today it is, I am light.
Mm.
I am light. I am the light. If we know what our purpose is, I think the rest is gravy.
And I agree with that. And I think that that's the perfect way to end it. But I do want to reiterate on that little thing is that you have redefined your purpose throughout your lifetime.
Indeed. Yes.
And where you are today is that, and that I am light. And what is most beautiful to understand is that we are all light. We are all light. And we are going to end this on that. Stand in your light. And thank you. Thank you, Ellen. And thank you all for listening and participating. And I will see you the next time.